videos I have been mentioning that on weekends or when I have breaks from work, I tend to feel more down and depressed, and I can't figure out why that is. And I was watching Dr. K's modules on trauma. He explains this in a way that makes perfect sense to me.
Something interesting happens in these kids. They have periods of intense activity where they're working really hard, followed by periods of intense laziness. So what these kids oftentimes will discover is that while the parent is watching and making sure I do something, my nervous system is hyperactive and I feel like I'm in danger, I'm in a high stress state. But the moment that the parent leaves the room, the moment that the external pressure disappears, I lose all of my motivation. I actually require that external push to be able to perform. So these are the three cases that we see that we're sort of just picking three. There are many other variations of this, but we can sort of see how even opposite cases of abuse versus neglect or even highly demanding parents all result in the same thing, which is hyperactivation of the sympathetic nervous system.
I was doing so great posting a TMS video every day, and then yesterday I missed my very first video. I apologize. It's been a bit of a hectic couple of days, so this video will cover TMS day 19 and TMS day 20, which is today. And oddly enough, the TMS days coincide with the day of the month. So yesterday was day 19 of my treatment, and today was day 20, and today is August 20th. So that's convenient. And so I'm just about halfway through treatment now. Let me talk about day 19 first, which was yesterday. Um, Yesterday and like the day before, my mood I felt my mood really kind of all over the place. I felt moody. I yesterday in particular, I felt more anxious, and I think maybe because I drank a huge cup of coffee in the morning before going into work, that could have something to do with it. Or maybe not, because I didn't only feel more anxious, I also felt sadder. Like my mood overall was lower than I think my usual baseline. Like I just felt more down and sad for no particular reason. And I was trying to think, like, was it that I didn't take my stimulant medication? And I don't think that was it. I actually did take my stimulant yesterday, the Asteris, the 26.1 milligram that I'm taking for ADHD. So I couldn't figure it out, and I was feeling kind of like I feel like right before my period's about to start, because I do tend to my mood tends to be lower. Sometimes I'm like more anxious, and I could tell, and then sure enough, like a day or two later, I start my period. So yeah, definitely when I'm going to start my period a couple days before then, I feel the same way that I felt yesterday, but the difference being is I'm nowhere near starting my period. It's not that time of the month yet. I still got like almost 2 weeks to go. So I'm not sure what's going on there. I don't know if it was the caffeine or if it's something to do with the treatment, the fact that we're like halfway through treatment. So that was yesterday. Yesterday I was just in a really weird mood overall. I felt again more sad than usual and a lot more anxious. I rated my anxiety at like 9 and my depression at an 8 yesterday. Today was a very stressful day because I started seeing kids up at that other campus that I work at, that I'm only there on Tuesdays. And my caseload up there is primarily comprised of, even though it's a TK through 12 school, my caseload for this year is primarily comprised of TK, so transitional kindergarten students or kindergarteners. And TK and kindergarteners, typically anywhere from age 4 to 6. Those are the kids that I'm working with on Tuesdays, and to see them in groups of 2 or 3, if you've ever worked with a kindergartner or someone who's in preschool or TK, just a lot of times just trying to work with one of them is tough, because a lot of times they don't attend. They're kind of bouncing all over the place. So imagine that, but I was seeing groups of 2 or 3 of them at a time, back to back to back, starting from 8:15 all the way up until about like 2:30. So I had a bunch of groups, and they were all comprised of these little tiny human beings, and I felt like I had to be like on all day because they really take a lot of my energy, right? You really have to be kind of on them, make sure they're engaged, to make sure they're participating in therapy. So Tuesdays are gonna be rough. Um, so yeah, today was tough, but I rated my depression actually lower than I rated it yesterday. So today I rated my depression at a 7, and I mean at a 6, and I rated my anxiety at an 8. And today I had my weekly check-in with the psychiatrist who is in charge of overseeing the TMS treatment. And he always asks me, how are you feeling? How's treatment going? Any changes in your mood? And I told him, um, and today particularly, I felt like I was more irritable. And I think I've been mentioning this in the past couple of videos. I feel like I'm more irritable than usual. I don't have as much patience, even for my son. Yesterday I yelled at him because I had to tell him like 3 times to clean his room. But usually I'm much more patient with him, and I don't feel the need to yell. And then like little things at work have been like bothering me, right? Like um, if I have to like modify my schedule or move things around for whatever reason, or my supervisor tells me like, oh, you have to see like this kid for this much time, whereas we had agreed on something else. Like it's been bugging me a lot more. Like I'm just like, ugh, I'm so sick of it. Like I'm so tired of it. I'm fed up with work stuff already, and it's literally only like the second or third week back from summer break. Uh, and so I can tell that I'm just a lot more irritable and don't have the patience for things that I usually have. And I mentioned that to the provider, the psychiatrist. I'm like, all right, yesterday my mood was all over the place. I felt more depressed and sadder than I usually am. I also felt more anxious, but I don't know if that was because I drink that cup of coffee in the morning. And today I'm like not as sad, um, but I'm still anxious, and I can definitely tell that I'm feeling a lot more irritable. And so he said, okay, well, thank you for letting me know. And what he said he was going to do is that he was going to change the protocol, the treatment protocol a little bit to increase the threshold on the right side, which is supposed to do something to mitigate, he said, the anxiety and even some of the irritability. I don't remember exactly how he put it, but he said something like this side is modulates like the inhibitory part of the brain that is supposed to help kind of calm the anxiety. Um, Whereas the left side is for depression. But he said for the protocol on the left side, he's not going to make any changes. He's going to leave it the way it is. It's just he's going to increase the right side because of what I told them about. Like, I've been feeling more irritable and more anxious. Um, so, of course, he asked me first. He's like, "Does that sound good to you?" I was like, "Well, you sound like you know what you're doing, doc." So, yeah, if you think it'll help, then by all means do it, right? So actually we got up to 125 on the right side today. Whereas on the left side, which is the part that's supposed to be treating the depression, we're still at 115 when it comes to the intensity. Yeah, but I still felt anxious. Another thing that the psychiatrist mentioned, and this is not the same psychiatrist that prescribes me my ADHD medications. That's like my primary psychiatrist, like a different person. But what he did say was that since you're on stimulants, one thing to look out for is around 4 or 5 in the afternoon when the stimulant starts to kind of taper off. It's typical for people to start feeling definitely more tired and even much more irritable. So if you want to keep an eye on about what time of the day is it when you're feeling like most irritable or most tired. If it's like toward the end of the day, it could be because of that effect of the stimulant tapering off, which makes sense, right? People who drink caffeine to kind of keep them going, they'll need 1 or 2 or 3 cups of coffee um, to kind of keep that level of energy up. And I don't know if the Asteris, the stimulant medication, I don't know if it's extended release or how long it's supposed to last. I guess I could take a look at it and see. But yeah, the way that he was explaining it makes sense. So that basically covers yesterday and today as far as the TMS treatment. It wasn't painful. I definitely felt it a little bit more on the right side today because we got up to 125. A little bit uncomfortable, but not painful. I don't have a headache, which is a good thing. Um, but yeah, I know that my stimulants definitely amp up my anxiety. And that, like that, it's a given, right? It goes without saying. So that's why I want to eventually come off the stimulants when I don't have so much going on. Like, again, I'm in the middle of graduate school. I'm working full time. I'm doing the TMS treatment. I'm trying to be a mom. I mean, I'm being a mom, but sometimes I feel like I'm not doing the best job because I feel like I'm just spread so thin. Um, my son is 10 years old, and he's pretty independent when it comes to most things. But today, he called me and he told me, he said, "Mom, I have to go to Rocket Lab." And Rocket Lab is like an intervention that they give to kiddos who are struggling with writing or reading. And I was shocked because I was like, language arts and writing has always been his strong suit. He's gotten like multiple awards for language arts in the past. He's in 5th grade now. And like I was like kind of upset because I was like, I wonder if it was like a mistake on the teacher's part, like grading his assessment, because it doesn't make sense to me that he would be so low to a point where he would need intervention. But also, like, I feel like keep, I'm not on top of like his studies, I'm not on top of like his homework and how he's doing in school, other than going to like parent teacher conferences and stuff, um, which like makes me feel like a shitty mom because I should be on top of all these things and see how he's doing academically. So yeah, I feel like I'm spread so thin that I'm sometimes not even really focusing on what's most important, which is of course my son, right? Um, what else was I gonna say? Okay, a couple videos I have been mentioning that on weekends or when I have breaks from work, I tend to feel more down and depressed, and I can't figure out why that is. And I watched someone. His name is the Healthy Gamer. I've mentioned him. Well, I mean, that's his YouTube name anyway. His YouTube username. I've mentioned him a couple times in the past. He is a psychiatrist who also studied for 5 years to become a monk, and his name is. They call him Dr. K, right? And he streams live chats like on Twitch and stuff, and sometimes he brings people on his like YouTube and his stream to talk about like what they might be experiencing and kind of explains things from his perspective, not only as a psychiatrist, but as someone who really he really integrates the Eastern medicine and Ayurveda and like meditation and everything that he learned from his time studying to become a monk. At some point, I believe he said he was addicted to video games, and that's kind of what led him on this spiritual path. And eventually, he came back, graduated from Harvard, became a psychiatrist. So, if you guys want to check him out, it's The Healthy Gamer or Dr. K. His talks are super insightful. I bought one of his modules. It was like $30, and I think it was totally worth it, honestly. It talks about trauma, and he really goes deep into like what trauma is and how it manifests in different people. And my therapist, who I've been seeing, already said that she has diagnosed me with PTSD because of my home environment, because of the fact that my parents used to beat me. And, that's unfortunately very typical in Mexican households to discipline your kids by beating them with a belt or a chancla or what have you. I lived in a very stressful environment where like I was in constant fear of being beat. And then at school, I would go to school and I would be in constant fear of the bullies because I was like constantly bullied because I have cerebral palsy. So, and I was very much a loner. I had a couple friends here and there growing up, but for the most part, I was by myself. Um, and so growing up, I buried myself by going online and going on AOL chat rooms and making friends online because I felt like my real life kind of sucked. So anyway, the my psychologist or therapist, who I'm gonna see tomorrow morning, said that she has diagnosed me with like PTSD, because of all this trauma that I experienced growing up. And I was watching Dr. K's modules on trauma, his trauma module, and he explains this in a way that makes perfect sense to me. He said, one of the ways that this manifests when you grow up with really controlling parents, kind of like helicopter parents, right? You're constantly hyper alert, right? So you're constantly kind of on edge and constantly like that norepinephrine or adrenaline or whatever it is, cortisol running through your body, because you feel like you have to be on constant alert when your parents or whoever that person is, when they're in the room. And then when they leave, it's like you can finally relax. So he said what's interesting is that these individuals have periods of intense productivity where they work really hard and get a lot done, and then like as soon as the person leaves the room, then they just kind of get lazy and they kind of need that person to kind of be there to be productive. I'm not explaining it well. I think I'm going to play a little excerpt of his video. I don't know if that's even allowed, but I'm going to play that excerpt of the video so that you guys can see what he means. That it made so much sense to me the way that he put it.
Now, even in this situation, we can see the hyperactivation of the sympathetic nervous system, because now the child is under a lot of pressure to perform. And when we need to perform, it's our sympathetic nervous system that kicks in. It's not rest and digest and Netflix and chill. It's parents need me to get straight A's, so I gotta get straight A's and I gotta work really, 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 really hard. Something interesting happens in these kids. They have periods of intense activity where they're working really hard, followed by periods of intense laziness. So what these kids oftentimes will discover is that while the parent is watching and making sure I do something, my nervous system is hyperactive and I feel like I'm in danger, I'm in a high stress state. But the moment that the parent leaves the room, the moment that the external pressure disappears, I lose all of my motivation. I actually require that external push to be able to perform. So these are the three cases that we see that we're sort of just picking three. There are many other variations of this, but we can sort of see how even opposite cases of abuse versus neglect or even highly demanding parents all result in the same thing, which is hyperactivation of the sympathetic nervous system.
I feel like that's how I feel all the time, even though I think the source of my trauma for a lot of it are probably my parents. Not like willingly, obviously, I'm sure they did the best they could given the tools they had. But the source of the trauma is really like my parents and people at school, like the bullies, right? My peers growing up. But my body, I feel like, is always constantly on fight or flight mode, even at work. So at work, that source, that person doesn't necessarily have to be my parents. It's a lot of times it's the fact that my supervisor, the other SLP, is in the room with me and I constantly feel like I'm being watched, and it's exhausting. Even if she's like the nicest person ever, and she's probably not like thinking that I'm terrible at my job or that I don't know what I'm doing, and she's probably not having all of these negative thoughts about me that I have about myself, but just having her there, I feel like puts me on constant alert. I feel like that's why whenever I don't have to work on weekends or on like Christmas break or summer break or whatever, I have my periods of not only laziness, but sadness and just lack of energy. And I'm going to bring this up with my therapist tomorrow morning and see what she kind of thinks about it. What else did I want to talk about? let's see, irritability, uh, heightened anxiety for sure. Um, yeah, no, I think I've pretty much covered uh, what I wanted to cover about the past 2 days of, of TMS or transcranial magnetic stimulation therapy. For those of you who are new here, I have cerebral palsy, major depressive disorder, ADHD, and generalized anxiety disorder. And yeah, I am undergoing transcranial magnetic stimulation therapy or TMS for depression and anxiety, and I'm getting the bilateral stimulation done on both sides. And my goal is to make one of these videos every single day that I'm undergoing treatment to kind of let you guys know like how the treatment went, what it felt like, and the symptoms that I've been experiencing. So I will be back tomorrow for day 21 of transcranial magnetic stimulation therapy, and let me know down below if you have any questions or comments.